Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we're talking about technology. And technology seems to be one of those things that, like, no matter how hard you try, you can't escape it, right? It does feel like everything that we do day in and day out is more heavily reliant on some form of technology. More so in my mind than it's ever been before.
And I don't think it's going to get any better, if that's the right term. I mean, it's just going to keep
better
getting
and worse. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
It's not going to get any less.
Yeah. I saw a graph and it was talking about the rate of technology change. And we are probably at the right age level. I think the three of us to have seen some of the most dramatic change, not all of it,
the
but
prehistoric to now level.
Yeah. And it's pretty incredible. Like, you know, if you say real high level, you're like, oh yeah, trajectory is straight line. Looks like you'd think, like increasingly, technology has become more available at a faster pace, et cetera. When you start to look at that curve on a microcosm of 5-year sections, 10-year sections, the severity of the curve is tremendous. I mean, it starts to get really steep really fast, and it's actually kind of incredible.
Scary.
Yeah, well, it's a little scary, and it's kind of incredible to think about the way technology has changed in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, even, me being the oldest of the three, like I go back to, I remember.
I wasn't going to say that.
No, it's true. It's all right. And we had our first computer that had I remember my parents were at the store and they were saying you had this floppy disk or this hard disk, but they were sure the floppy disk was the way it was going to go. That was wrong. But that computer had no memory. I think it had 512K of total memory, and I remember things that as it became something in my life where you would use a word processor versus typing, right? That I could out-type the computer. So I could type faster than the computer could go. So you couldn't see any mistakes on the word processor because you were ahead of it. And that sort of thing. And you go from that to where we are now. I mean, I think about it all the time. You go back even further, that when it was UPenn had the computer, there was this massive computer that took up a building. I think it had less memory than our phones.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's just what's happened with the memory and then all the things that translates to and the ability to do is amazing. But it has made us, the downside is it's made us so reliant on things and on knowing things and changing the immediacy that we need things. Now, if your phone doesn't do what you want it to do in 10 seconds, all of us are impatient. We're like, what is wrong with this thing? Whereas,
you have the patience of Job for 10 seconds. That's pretty good.
10 seconds. I didn't realize
I think 7's the limit, man.
All right, well.
That's like 3, delete. Okay, move on.
There we go. You see, there's the age. There's the age difference right there. I have 10 seconds.
Yeah. When we're only a year apart, so 7 seconds.
Well, it accelerated that quickly, right? The change happened so fast. But it is interesting, when you look at it, all the things that have come in and all the things that it can do. Today, it actually caught my attention, and it wasn't for any other reason. You came down from upstairs. I walked out of my office. I had printed something. I don't know why you were going downstairs. We were both walking, looking at our phone. We had got up from our desk with our computers and needed our phones to tell us something, though I don't know what we would have needed. Mm-hmm. And I actually saw you doing it and put my phone away. Because I was checking my email. I was like, this is crazy. I just got up from my
walked
desk.
away from my email.
I just walked away. All I'm doing is going downstairs to get a paper that I printed because I'm old and I like to print everything. Yeah. And then coming back up. What could go wrong in that 45 seconds?
Here, I thought you were going the other way. You both were carrying paper and people were like, what are you talking about? Because that could happen more often than not.
More often than not.
I think we're also, amongst us, our group, we're in the toughest perspective because we actually do remember the before time.
Yeah.
And so we still have some of those tendencies. We still have some of those remembrance, maybe that we thought things were better than they actually were because we're like, oh yeah, that was better that way. But I think the other side is that we get frustrated more when stuff doesn't work the way it's supposed to, because they sold us that this was going to solve the world's problems for whatever issue it is, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that aggravates us immensely. Little
things too. We all grew up driving without GPS.
Yeah.
And, I can remember as a teenager and I'm thinking back and my parents let me drive to Ocean City as a teenager. Right. And that's kind of crazy to me. No map,
You doing that with your kids?
No cell phone. I don't even think I had AAA. You know, like
Yeah.
you know, I had
AAA.
yeah,
I would have never had that.
yeah, and so like, but I printed out my directions,
Yeah.
and I knew from some landmarks from driving, like, yep, I'm going the right direction. And I think I paid a lot more attention to like what was happening because nobody was dictating it to me. They weren't saying,
Well,
like,
you know, the two
turn
things
right in 500 feet, you know? So
the two things that come to mind on that are, number one is I can go before that when I first got my license, like you could have printed directions, I guess, but someone would have had to type them because the systems didn't exist yet that would actually build them for you.
Right.
So like I remember my uncle Mike was super detail oriented. And we had directions for how to go to Maine. So you talk crazy. I drove to Maine to go to our cabin that's 4 hours beyond civilization. And there was things that said, like, you know, funny things. One of them was you could take, and Herb would get this, you go through Portland or you go straight through the turnpike. If you'd like to pay more money and take longer and have no good things to see, you could stay there or just take the bypass and go around. But then you would get the markers, like, you know, like you got this house and then you'll see this, and then you turn onto this dirt road. And my parents let me drive. And my parents let me drive there. The other funny thing, which is like totally, it's a thing of the times. It's one of those things that you would see like on social media with people, what they did to their cars. But I remember my dad getting in an argument with me when I was in college because I removed my spare tire from my car.
Oh, yeah.
And I replaced it with amplifiers and subs, which sounded amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And I was driving to the beach with a girl and blew a tire. And I had no spare tire. And, you know, you can't be real cool when you don't even have a spare tire and you're broke down on the side of the roads in the Pine Barrens. That's not a good look.
You probably didn't have a cell phone at that point to
and
call anybody.
There was no cell phone to call anybody. Yeah. So I don't remember exactly what happened, how I resolved that. But I remember when my dad found out, he wasn't even unhappy. He was amused that like it had worked out, that what he said would happen happened.
It was
Told
true.
you.
It was true.
Right.
Yeah.
How could you get rid of your spare? You know? But we're off topic, but it is true. Like the accountability that developed from that kind of freedom. You know, I saw something recently about if our parents only had any idea how far we rode our bikes every day. You know what I mean? Like I was talking about it with friends and we were talking about driving our kids to all these events. And what did you play as a kid? And I said, well, I could only play something that I could ride my bike to. Like that was it. Like if it was further than that, I wasn't playing that sport because there wasn't a consistent way for me to get there. So I had to be able to ride my bike to where I wanted to play, you know, Little League or whatever it was. And you think about that, you know, and even now I still say to my kids, we were putting down mulch the other day and the lights came on. Yeah. And I said, well, it must be time to go in. And they just looked at me, you know, and I was like, because to them, like they're given times they have to be in and even more than that, like we always know where they are. Right. Whereas my parents, it was literally when the street lights came on, you had to head home.
It was going to be dark soon.
Because it was going to be dark soon, which is some level of accountability, but also an unbelievable level of trust that they just trusted that they didn't know where I was, you know, and at times it was for better or worse as a kid. But technology has sort of taken that over and taken that away. And where the connection I think you can make is GPS for us, right? Sure. It's something we talk about all the time. GPS is an amazing tool. I mean, what it enables people to be able to see, to really know versus thinking you know it until it doesn't work. And the second it doesn't work, all of our ability goes out the window for some of our operators because they can't see it. They don't know, you know, whereas you take some of our more experienced operators and they're like, well, they're not going to be happy about it. And they're probably going to call and complain that the system doesn't break. And this is why we don't like technology, but they can keep working, you know, and that's the difference is sort of when you're on the front side of it, the people that have learned it with the technology, I don't know what the next step is for for the world, for the people to be able to utilize the technology, but still somehow have known how you would do it without the technology. Right. Ford, you know who comes to mind actually? And we were talking about it was Matt Lister. Right. Matt was talking to me about, hey, could you guys run some CAD for me if I can get you this stuff, you know, for some more complicated jobs? He said it only happens once or twice a year. And I was like, all right, I can talk to Dylan and we'll see. I don't see why we couldn't. And I said, well, how do you do it? And he said, I still do it all by hand. I mean, and so like, how do you at one point think like, oh my God, he's still doing it by hand. But at the other point say, I don't even know that if I can do it by hand at all.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, Ford, you did it by hand, but could you do it right now? And could you do it efficiently and quickly and trust your, like, I don't know.
Well, you're not putting out the speed of things. I think that's what really boils down to. It's the speed. Because I mean, you're talking GPS equipment, but I'm thinking GPS just vehicle wise. Like when I first started, you had a map book.
Right.
For the young people, you had to go to page 28H and like the letter thing, and you had to like find your actual route because you had to follow the road through.
You're thinking like the triptychs from AAA, right?
Yep, something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know the AAA thing that they'd actually do that routing for you. We didn't have AAA as kids, but it was just the book. And like literally, the first company I worked for, they would just tell me the page number, like go to J22, and that would be where the job site was, type thing. But then I remember like the first time MapQuest or something, you actually like typed in the address, and it would actually give you. Like that was before it was on that was before you were on your phone, but at least it gave you the route to get there.
Yeah, and like that was I think an early adaptation of like GPS type technology.
Right.
And at times it really burnt you, right?
Oh.
Like terribly. I remember Allison and I driving somewhere. We're like, we're gonna go somewhere close. We're gonna get away from school for a couple hours, and there was supposed to be like this nice little like hiking trail waterfall area. We drove for like, I don't know, hour and a half. 2 hours, because that was like a reasonable driving distance. And it's like, in like, 700 feet, you're at your destination or whatever. It probably wasn't that. It was like 1/10 of a mile. Like you're watching the odometer tick. Anyways, it's like the middle of the road and there's nothing. There's like a guardrail. There's a mountain on this side. And we're like, okay, I don't know where to go from here. And there's nothing else here. So that was really cool. Let's turn around and go home.
Yeah, it was.
Well, that is the double part of this is that like our generation, we still have some of the base there because it's basic things, but there's a lot of people I know that don't know which is northeast, west, and south.
Yeah.
That was something you learned with directions because that was very important.
Right.
The sun, just trying to use the things around you.
Yeah, the things around you to tell you.
Same thing with GPS equipment.
Yeah.
If you don't have that baseline information and then something doesn't work, you're in a bad spot.
I wasn't great at northwest, east, south directional, but I was really good at landmarks. So I would know like, okay, I know where I'm at compared to a landmark, and that thing is north of something. So like I would like have to like math it in my head, right? Yeah. But I remember doing that. I'm like,
a funny one on the maps is there's a few that come to mind. I drove from New Orleans back home, very circuitous route following the Mississippi River on purpose, and got, I don't know, a couple hours into this and then called my uncle and told him what I was doing. And he was like, well, you have your map book. And I was like, no. I mean, I had a map of like a tourist map of Louisiana. It's gotten me this far. Now I'm in Mississippi. I don't really know what to do now. I'm just going to drive north along this river until I hit Tennessee or something.
Just keep going the right direction.
It was not a great plan. But the one that actually, once I was married, and Erin is younger and more, tied to less of that, just running around and hoping for the best. And we were driving from Vermont to Maine. And I was like, this is a perfect route. It just goes right through the middle of the mountain. It is going to be amazing. It's going to save so much time over this, this highway route on the interstate. Oh, no. It was a dirt road and the steepest decline or incline, steepest, route on the East Coast. It was gorgeous. It was dirt. I did not have a truck at that point. I was driving a car. She was very unhappy.
It was probably terrifying. Yeah.
And she was like, well, how far do we have to go? I was like, I have no idea. I mean, it's on this map. It looks like 40 miles. And apparently it's going to be all through the wilderness, but I wasn't worried about it.
Right.
Because I sort of grew up with the comfort level of like, theoretically, as long as you have enough, the gas said I could theoretically, the math in my head said I could make it to a gas station.
Sure.
I'm still going the right direction. Doesn't matter.
I was still going east, and I was going straight. But the more we develop that, the less even now I find myself like, I'll put it on there and put it in the GPS because my, it's our Android Auto is already sitting on the screen anyway. So why not let it tell me, if traffic's going to come? Because that's what I like.
I was just going to say, have become not so reliant on it telling me how to get somewhere, but telling me if I'm going to be inconvenienced.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, that's going to take me 7 minutes longer, even though it's the way I would normally go because construction.
Well,
because
even, around here for the Schuylkill,
Yeah.
and a couple of the
time
roads
of
like
day,
that,
for sure.
that I'll look at it and it might be faster. And I'm like, nah, I'm not taking this Google.
Yeah.
And then I'll like take a different way. And Erin's like, you don't even follow your GPS. Whereas Erin, like the girls make fun of her. She follows the blue line. If that thing went off a cliff, she'd drive the minivan right off the cliff. There'd be no questions asked. She's going off the cliff with that thing.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a couple of roads here back when I was doing the perk testing that like they created a lake and the road's still like just
Like Marsh Creek.
Yeah, and they didn't have updated them at that point. And so literally the road would like look like you're going through and like get to the end. There's like a guardrail there. You're like, well, I'm not getting through there. So we got to backtrack and go around the loop or something like that. But I think that's the part that the mentorship piece of this, and for the younger people to at least try and learn some of that base knowledge. You know, I thought we think about it too. We don't use these terms, but in other places they call them blue tops and stuff like that for grading and learning the stakes and learning, you know, when you're adding something, do you go up the GPS pole or the, you know, laser pole, or do you go down, you know, those types of things where like, if you don't need that anymore, if you do, you know, maybe it's just in the back of your brain for some day, but having at least that base knowledge really helps, because all the technology is wonderful until it's not.
Yeah.
And then it's a very expensive kicking toy at that point.
Well, and we zeroed in on GPS, but I mean, whether it be, you know, bidding or project management software, you know, it's
apps,
the apps or the, you know, the equipment, telematics, all this stuff is, you know, it's amazing. I mean, I remember when Steve, you know, he handed me that cat book and he was like, here's how you're going to figure out everything you're going to do. And it was, you know, you had to go in and find it and like, how much could you push, how far at what, on what slope?
Yeah.
You know, and so when I did it, I had a real idea of what was happening, of what I was trying to get done, and if it was justifiable. And the more you get into automating these bidding systems and the project management and even our telematics, you know, the more you can lose touch with that. And I think it's one of those things. I mean, you know, Dylan's a great example. He knows these numbers. You know what I mean? He has an exact idea of why he's doing what he's doing. But how do we take that and deliver that to the next generation of estimator who doesn't inherently have that background that he does, but just knows the answer, but why? You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's, you start to understand
you prove your work like the old school day, right?
So I was going to say, it starts to be one of the things in school, you know, when they used to say you have to prove your work. And I don't know how you were, but I was not one that wanted to show my work. I just
like, listen, is it right or wrong?
Yeah, the answer is 27. If it's wrong, then mark it wrong. But if it's not, then that's the answer.
Yeah.
But as I get older, I can see the value in it, especially with the rate of change in technology, because it's so important. Last night, Mara was doing something with math, and she was working on like, you know, volume of a cone and a sphere and a this and a that. And she was good at it and enjoying it. And she was like, well, can you just help me? I don't have a calculator. She didn't want to, she had her laptop open, but she was like, can you just do it? So I'm doing it on my phone and just punching in what she asked me to. And I was like, well, you have no idea if this is right. And she was like, no, it's right. And I was like, you don't even know that I'm hitting the right number in the calculator. You know what I mean? It was like, it's a funny tie, but her comfort level with just accepting that the answer was 27, even though she was writing down all the math, but she wasn't doing the actual math. You know what I mean? Like she was doing the process that got her to 4/3 times pi times whatever her number was. But like I could have said 37, you know, and we were doing a bid review and that came up and somebody said, oh, it's 75 pounds. And I was like, that's impossible. And as I said, that's impossible, Dylan typed, that's impossible, because we both knew that couldn't possibly be right. But they asked the question, the answer was 75, but 75 was never
wasn't right.
It couldn't possibly be the answer. Like I didn't even have to know.
Yeah.
If you just knew the question, it was wrong.
We've talked about this too. Like, you know, like there's a difference between knowing how something gets done and being able to correlate the response you're getting to what you know actually needs to be accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough at times, especially if you don't have the background or you haven't experienced it or gone through it. You and I were just talking about this the other day. You know, people new to our industry may have skill sets that are specific to the type of work that they're going to do. But do they know what it actually means? Do they know what the answer or the process even is impacting when it gets done? And how does the result look compared to what you wrote down?
I think it was one of the most interesting things, Ford's, about what you did in bringing in like Brian and I specifically, you know, is you identified skill sets and knowledge and that sort of thing. But you also, the way, and I'll speak for me, the way you delivered it to me and you gave it to me a piece at a time as I started to do this work coming out of electrical, I developed a base understanding of what I was actually trying to do. The numbers meant something. So I wouldn't just spit out numbers. And if anything, part of his like Ford's delivery for me made me more cautious, because if I said a stupid number, he was going to say that can't possibly be right. And I didn't want to be in a position where Ford's saying like that can't possibly be right.
Right.
You know, so it made me a little bit more careful. But I also felt like the same thing happened with you. You know what I mean? That he did it in a way that now there's stuff that you just take for granted, that then sometimes we run into problems when it's not as simple and somebody else, and we're looking at them like how could they not know that? And you're like, well, let's be fair here. You know, they'd only know it if they knew it, and they don't. And you should have known they didn't know it. I'm like, that is interesting. I could have anticipated that they wouldn't have known why it wasn't an acceptable answer.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think one thing about our company and one thing that makes, someone of high value is problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to solve a problem, you have to be able to get there, not just get something done. That can, push a pile. Okay. But why are we going to put the pile in that spot? Why are we going to put the pipe in that location? That's part of that experience and that knowledge and that learning that's behind it. It's not just because the plan says put the pile there,
right.
But you're looking at it as, do I have to go around that pile? Is that pile going to be in my way for in the future? That kind of thing. And that problem solving only comes if you know the process. You can't just come to the solution without knowing the process if you're trying to solve a problem.
You know,
go ahead, Brian. I was going to say, even if you don't know the process, thinking about what comes next before you do something is part of that problem solving activity, right? Because like you're saying, I know I've got to move the pile, but there may be 17 different places you could put the pile. But choosing the one place that you put the pile is impactful because like you're mentioning, everything that has to happen around it. Do I have to keep moving the pile out of my way? Is the pile going to have to come back to a different spot? What happens next in these areas around the pile or with that pile specifically? So understanding, like thinking through each piece of it.
Yeah, I was going to call out too the progression board. You know, when you, as you automate these things and we just sort of, it says the next step, mm-hmm. right? One place we've seen it numerous times is with pipe.
Yeah.
You know, when it's way easier to put a pipe 4 foot in the ground than 8 foot in the ground. But how many times over the last 5 years have we seen that because either
sequence was out of line.
Either the sequence was out or they wanted the pad or, any one of these things. And all of a sudden we're putting a pipe 13 foot in the ground that the estimator thought was going to be 4 foot in the ground. You got boxes. Do you have the boxes? No, I didn't have the boxes because it was supposed to be 4 foot in the ground.
Right.
Or
you have the right boxes for the finished solution, but you got to work twice as hard to do the work because you didn't do it before the grade was raised or
I meant trench boxes. Like we don't have trench boxes in because.
Or I thought you meant, well, we didn't order the inlets yet because we weren't ready to do that part of the project, but we had to. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that, this is a public service announcement for technology companies getting into construction that want to be in construction or sell products to construction. Our job every day is to undersell and overdeliver. Mm. And the technology space is about selling a dream and then maybe making it work.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubber really hits the road because they show you something that is a magical solution and then you use a product and it doesn't perform. It frustrates the people that are trying to use it. It frustrates the people that are paying for it. It just creates a situation that really makes it hard for us to make decisions on things because we've had those in the past and we want to bring things to make the job easier for everyone. But at the same time, we have to be cautious about it because you do it too many times and people just start, ignoring it. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I was going to bring that up. Something you said there, and we talked about actually before the conversation even started, the early adoption versus late adoption or slow adoption, pros and cons, and especially when it comes to things like software development, that like Scrum philosophy or theory of getting something to market quickly that is still a beta version of what you're trying to actually sell or accomplish is like part of that debate in my mind. Like early adoption, you're going to get it before other people have it. Maybe you can take advantage of it. Maybe you can find some way to use it earlier. A lot of times there could be the potential for cost savings. The thing gets more expensive as it becomes more developed or has more modules, more features. But I think you do run that risk of saying, I thought it was going to do all these things and it does this one thing. And the time until it's ready to do the next thing, it may or may not be worth waiting for.
Pass by.
I mean, the other thing is there's a specific one of the softwares that we tried to run with that that I pressed for an early adoption, and I thought it looked like really promising. Yeah. It still looks promising. It's a market that is developing, and there's a bunch of vendors trying to work their way into it. But beyond just not doing what we thought it would do, we realized after the fact it didn't even do what we thought it was doing, if that makes any sense. So the problem became the data was so foreign to us that, almost like the discussion we just had, I had no way to know that the data was wrong because I didn't have any of the source data. And as we started to go a different route and construct it ourselves and try and make something that made sense for us, our own process, our own efforts showed us all the things and it was like each day the data got more wrong.
Yeah.
And now we stand here and I'm like, we made whole platforms off of the idea that this data was accurate, and it was not accurate.
Yeah. And we were making the assumption that, but based on the question we had asked, we were getting the answer we wanted. And actually that's something Erin talks about, early, years ago. She was helping us build a sheet, cause Erin's phenomenal with, Excel program access. And we would say like, I want it to do this. And she'd be like, cool, here's this. And we're like, okay, now can it also do this? And she's like, well, yeah, but that's two different things. And I think what was happening with that software in some ways, and I do think it was manipulative or maybe even deceptive, but in that scenario, we asked a question and we got an answer, but we never asked how they were arriving at the answer. And once we did our own math, our own investigation of the answer, we said, well, that's not the right answer. You didn't get to it the right way. And the results you've given us is just worthless. It's worthless, unfortunately.
Well, and then, you know what it also reminded me of was another time, and this was with HCSS.
Yeah.
That I think it was the three of us were trying to get basically an aggregate of the data out of our HCSS program. I don't know if you guys remember this. And we said there has to be a way to get this. And we called HCSS and their customer service was amazing. They talked to me for hours, you know what I mean, about how could you do this? And I was so frustrated. And I was at home one night and I was trying to explain it to Erin, and she was like, well, I mean, it's a database. It has to do what you're asking. And I was like, no, it doesn't. I have been on the phone with them. And they were like, on the phone with who? And I said, with their tech people. And she was like, hold on, you call and you get like a local, fully employed, like English speaking tech person at the company headquarters. And I was like, yeah, 24 hours a day. She was like, that's unbelievable. And I was like, yeah. I was like, watch. And so I did it. I logged in, got the name. I was like, they'll take over the computer. They'll show me whatever. And so she said, do you mind if I talk? And I was like, no, I don't care. And because she understood what I wanted.
Right.
In 35 seconds, they gave us what I had worked for months to try and get them to give me because I asked the wrong question.
Right.
Like, in other words, it was another example of when I knew what I wanted, but I did not know how to convey what I needed their program to do. Mm-hmm. And it actually did it. And I did it so poorly that they didn't even understand what I was asking for.
Yeah.
And the second that a person with some tech background with no construction knowledge asked for the data, they were able to produce that data. And that's one of the risks you run with all this technology stuff is you take, the most seasoned of our operators. Well, they're not tech people. So if you run into a problem, then they may not even be able to ask the right question, and that's where so many times now I just default to Scott, and I say Scott.
It's kudos for Scott because we actually have someone on our team that can speak both languages well enough.
Yeah.
I have a friend, he's an engineer and he's risen up the ranks at his company, but his skill set actually isn't that he's an engineer. His skill set that he knows enough about engineering to talk with the engineers and the programmers and enough communication style that he can communicate it with people that don't understand this. Because the problem with all these products in general are there is such a delta between the people that design it and do the computer things or whatever it is, and the people that are writing checks for it. Yeah. They speak two different languages. They have two different sets of expectations, as you said, back to like get it out to market,
right?
Versus us being like, it better be polished before we write a check for this thing. And there's just such a delta there, and there's not many people that can have their foot in both worlds.
Yeah. And actually, that's what Erin did. Like, before Erin stopped working, that's what she did. She was that liaison between the two, and it's why she said the number of times I've watched the company that she was at build these extensive systems and get to the end and realize they didn't actually ask them to build what they wanted, and they don't realize it, just like us. That's why it was easy for her in our scenario. Because not only was it simpler, but she had seen that exact thing play out where you ask for a specific thing, they deliver that end.
But it's not actually what you want.
It's not actually what you wanted. It doesn't actually give you the answer or the data or the information. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And then you realize it, and you've actually made it harder because now you either have to rebuild the system or, to use HCSS's term, bastardize the system our way, like make it do what we want it to do. And I realized, when Scott's designed our system, it's taken a lot longer. But the number of things we realized as a result of it, I mean, like if you actually did like a map of it, we realized that some information was coded wrong in 4 different systems, to different degrees, that the 4 systems the database couldn't talk because the database was identifying it by identifiers that had been entered incorrectly across each one of them.
Or inconsistently.
That I meant inconsistently is what I correct. Inconsistently, so that database A, B, C, and D all had the information, but they wanted to call it by a different name because of either purposely or accidentally coding it incorrectly. Yeah. And the old system never picked up on it because it just, that's invalid, and just threw it all out.
Right.
Well, that's actually something that's funny. That's a real microcosm, but it's interesting. So back in the day, you'd have a job. You'd bid the job and you'd use whatever name for it. Maybe the client, maybe whatever. And then as the job went on, it kind of grew its own name because people started calling it something, or maybe there was a client there or whatever. You just started kind of calling it by whatever. And so throughout that project, there might be 5 or 6 names on that from the time you got the bid in till the time you completed the job. Like it just kind of morphed as it went through. The team in the field called it one thing. The paperwork called it something else, whatever. And that didn't used to matter but when you're using a computer, you could show up with 5 different projects because the name matters or that's an identifier.
It's an identifier.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that create challenges for people in the field because maybe it's the road name or whatever the scenario is. And they start calling it one thing, the system's calling it something else, and they don't mesh. Well, and so that creates problems for, people that are doing administrative stuff to it because they're like, there's no cost against this job, but there's cost against this. And so it really, getting all that stuff correct matters more than it ever did in the past.
Yeah. And sure. We rarely talk about it, but Ford's got his Peter Scheim hat on. And I was thinking it was the same thing. Aaron was looking at data there, and it was the amount of data that they had that they don't even realize they can use. But what triggered it is exactly what Ford said, is that did you name the job by the client? Or like if you name the job by, you work at a house and you call it by the name of the person who owns the house, then the house gets sold and they call you back. The next owner calls you back and says, hey, I'd like you to do some work here. And then if you keep it the same, well, then you don't, the field would know it by the new name, but the old, you know what I mean? In other words, so it's that little simple thing that in a world that's not computer-based, data-based, we would just know that this house, house at,
down the street to the right, past the mailbox.
51 Main Street. You could have 7 different names for it, and it wouldn't matter because we all know what house we're talking about. But when you put it into a data set, every time you call it by something different, it's something different.
Right. It starts a new thread.
Thread. And so you have the data, but you have no way to aggregate it, no way to identify it as being similar.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think from the field staff, sometimes it creates aggravation for them. And one thing, this is the benefit and the challenge of having long-term clients, because you might be on job numbers, we want to be in the 20s, but maybe one of the previous jobs is still in there and you hit the wrong one and enter cost into the wrong job. The costs are still in,
Right.
but then on the back end, it doesn't work that way. So that's always that interesting thing where there's that benefit, but making sure you actually are paying attention to the details is super important.
For sure. Yeah. I saw something interesting that might be a good spot to wrap up because we've kind of talked around it in different ways. But it was talking about AI, right? Which is sort of the next, I think, iteration.
Well, they're telling us it is at least.
Advancement of technology.
It might be telling us it is.
AI.
We don't know who's telling us.
You don't know who's telling you anymore.
I've been told.
We've been told. But and it was funny because it talked about AI starting to become a replacement, but for the things you actually want to do, right? Like, so AI is replacing the things you want to do, like some of the creative components or some of the, estimating components or things like that. And instead leaving you with the things you didn't necessarily want to do in the first place. So like, so we need AI technology that like does the laundry for you, not that creates the art. So
Right.
yeah.
I saw, I don't know if you guys have, it started to happen, but on the Android Auto now, in addition to reading me my text while I'm driving, it now summarizes. If you send me like a anti-Ford text, like, a really long text that Ford wouldn't like.
Oh. I was like Anthony Ford, like someone.
No. Ford, we all know Ford does not like text.
No,
he likes
no.
text in the original sense of like 37 characters or something. Like he's
yeah.
Twitter before Twitter, like
Twitter
no more than
before
140
Twitter.
characters.
And but recently, if people send me, it says I'll summarize, and then it reads me a summary of the text. At which point, like, and this is where technology can be counterproductive. I now touch the screen because I want to see what this text says. Because how do I know that it was the right summary? Like, how can I? How can I reply when I don't actually know that that's what it said? What if it like didn't summarize accurately?
It's made some assumptions
It's
based
made
on the
some
words that were
assumptions
used.
based on the words that were used. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like in an ironic twist, I mean, but if we have this conversation in 10 years and we will probably have become accustomed to responding that way. And certainly younger people who are used to that technology would not even think twice and would just reply based on a summary.
Well, I got a fun one for you. That like there's certain things you wish it did. So we have different channels of communication. We have Teams, we have text, we have email, whatever. And you wish it would kind of bring that together because you're not sure if you had something you're looking back for, you're not sure which
channel to look at.
So you're scrolling through multiple channels because you're like, I know this person. I talked to them in multiple different ways. So I'm trying to find it. And you're scrolling through like 40 different things. You're like, okay, why doesn't it just make that better?
Mm-hmm.
But I know there's a new feature. It actually happened to me today. Now, it's happened twice, but I didn't realize it. On Apple versus the Android. Maybe the Android's been doing this for years. But I guess if someone's leaving a voicemail for you, you can still pick up the phone call.
Oh, during the voicemail.
Because I got someone's voicemail and I'm like, okay, whatever, waiting for the... And all of a sudden it's like, hello? I'm like, wait.
Yeah,
I thought it like jumped off the system.
I don't know. I'm like the least tech savvy. I don't know if Droid can do that or doesn't, but I know that a couple, Apple has the majority of the market. And I have had a few times where people pick up the phone and I'm like, well, I was trying to hang up because I'm not leaving a message.
Yeah.
You saw I called. It's still 1980. You know what I mean? I called
right.
you.
I called. That's enough.
Right. You have some form of caller ID. I called.
You have an indicator that.
Right. If you don't call me back, well, that's where we are.
Right.
But yeah, where they pick up and they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know. It was your voicemail. And then all of a sudden you're there.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess that's some new adjustment. But the minor things that they fix, they keep improving things. But the reality is that, we can't expect any of this stuff to be the magic bullet. We still have to use between our ears. And that's what makes us humans versus the computers.
Yeah. Yeah. You still have to know why the work's getting done. Yeah. Cool. That's a good place to wrap it up. I don't know that we solved anything, but it was a fun conversation.
Bunch of old guys complaining about technology.
Stay off my grass.
We are the old guys now.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you come back for another episode.